Hello. Well, for the purposes of today's video, we're going to ask the question, is it fair? Is it fair? Is it fair, for example, that the CEO of Walmart makes $16,270,000 every year, while the average Walmart employee makes $22,700 per year? Is that fair? Well, before we even answer that question, really, how you answer that question will tell something of the assumptions that you have in relation to economic justice. For example, there will be those people who will answer the question by saying basically that it's fair if everybody involved, whether it be the employer or the employee, the CEO or the employee, if everybody agreed to the terms of the wages. In this line of thinking, the CEO has a certain set of qualifications and a certain network and came by it in a certain way and agreed to work for the amount that they agreed to, the sum that they agreed to. Whereas the employee did the same thing. They had a certain amount of qualifications, availability, networking, knowledge, and they had the opportunity to work for their wages, and everybody agreed to it. So therefore, it should be okay. On the other hand, there will be those who will say, yeah, that should be okay, but come on, I mean, really? The disproportionate between amount of income between the person who makes $22,700 a year and the one who makes $16 million a year. I could understand the CEO making a little bit more, but that much more? Is it really just to give the person that much more, especially when the average Walmart employee wage of $22,700, that's not even a livable wage. You can't even live on that, not even you yourself, being able to make rent and everything else, all the bills and this sort of thing. So what we need in that line of thinking is that we need a little bit more of an equitable distribution of wealth. In other words, the equity of outcomes, equality of outcomes. Well, that's the question we're going to get at today. We're going to look at the concepts, a survey of the concepts of economic justice. And in doing so, there are at least three different things that we're going to be considering or highlighting as we go through these. Number one is justice. And this is the question of whether or not the distribution of wealth in society is just. Number two is the question of liberty. Basically, are people's basic rights being protected? Now, you might ask yourself, what sort of rights are concerned with the concept of economic justice? Well, one thing, for example, is the concept of property rights. Do people have property rights? And if so, does this particular economic system, does it protect those property rights? Another one somebody might say is basically the right to life. And it's often argued that it does us no good to say that we have a right to life if we don't actually have the ability to live. And so the right to life itself implies a certain sort of resource by which we can all live. So there's liberty, are people's basic freedoms and their rights being protected? Are people free to choose whatever profession that they like, or are they free to choose to work or to not work? So are people free to do those things, to make those kinds of decisions? And then there's the concept of efficiency. An economic system is going to have to deal with the concept of efficiency, and efficiency means how much produce is being made. What's the best way to produce the most wealth? What's the best way to produce sufficient amount of wealth in order to provide for those who are doing the producing? So efficiency, because I mean, let's face it, that's what an economic system is about, right? It's about productivity, it's about production. There are other considerations, yes, that might be brought into it, but the number one consideration of an economic system is, the whole point of it is to produce those resources that help support people. Okay, so with all of those in mind, and those three different concepts in mind, we're going to look at a couple of different views today that get to the question of whether or not wealth is distributed fairly or justly in a given society. So the first view that we'll look at is that of process distributive justice. process distributive justice. Process distributive justice says that wealth is distributed justly when the process by which a person gained wealth is fair. And the question is, did they come into their wealth in a moral way or an immoral way? Now, we can all think of different ways in which people attain their wealth, right? What the main one probably that first sort of jumps to mind, at least hopefully the one that at first jumps to mind, is the concept of working for a living. Working for a living should be nothing new to many people. Probably the reason you're going to college is so that you can upgrade your job status. You have in mind that you're going to work for a living and thereby obtain wealth. And certainly, working for wealth is a moral way to come by it. That's the one way, at least, in which we should come by it. Another way, another sort of moral way to do it would be maybe to inherit your wealth. Now, inheritance, certainly there are some people who are born into situations more privileged than others. But at the end of the day, if I earn money or if I earn material objects or property or this sort of thing, when I die, I should have the right to leave that to whomever I desire, whether it's next of kin or whether it's somebody that maybe I've mentored throughout my life, maybe it's a spouse, who knows. But I should have the right and the ability to transfer that wealth, those holdings, that property to whomever I want to, and they should have the right to receive it. And so inheritance is another just way in which a person would obtain wealth. Some people would say by winning it. Maybe a person is involved in a legal lottery or legal gambling. Maybe someone is involved in a sweepstakes of some kind and wins a prize. That's a moral way to come by or obtain wealth. It could be just a lucky career choice or stocks, investments, this kind of thing. That's another way to obtain wealth. And there can be many ways of obtaining wealth that are done in a just and moral way. Of course, there can also be those that are less than just, less than moral. Things like stealing something or defrauding somebody so that they think they may be investing in something and they end up getting caught up in a Ponzi scheme of some kind. There can be many ways in which people obtain their wealth in illicit ways, maybe pickpockets. Or the corporate money launderer or something of that nature. There are many ways that people could obtain their wealth in an immoral way. Now, when wealth is obtained in an immoral way, process distributive justice says that's an unjust distribution of wealth. But if a person just has a lucky career choice or they just have a windfall of earnings, as long as it's done in a way that is moral, that is just, that is fair, the process by which it is done, then it is a moral thing to do. Process distributive justice also forms the moral assumption, it's the foundational moral assumption for capitalism. Capitalism is an economic theory, it's a society-wide economic theory that says that the means of production in society ought to be privately held. The means of production in society ought to be privately held. Now, what is a means of production? Well, a means of production, you can think of it as anything, any concern in society that makes something or creates a resource that people consume in order to live. So a means of production might be a shoemaker. A means of production might be a farm, might be an automobile manufacturing concern. It could be many things. These are the producers in society. They produce the resources by which we all live. But the means of production in a capitalist society are privately held. That means that individuals in society or corporations, groups of individuals, have gone together and they've built these various businesses in order to produce that which people need, the resources that people need. So capitalism is where those things are privately held. The production is privately held. Now, a couple of benefits about this particular way of thinking about wealth distribution and the fairness of it all. One of the main benefits is that it emphasizes freedom. It emphasizes and maximizes individual freedom. In other words, in this particular scheme, you have the ability to choose whatever job you want to do. And you have the ability to choose. You have the ability to choose even to be unemployed if you want to. You have the ability to choose to work or not to work in which career path you're going to take, what you're going to do with your money after you finish it. You can invest it, you can save it, you can hoard it, you can spend it. You can do whatever you want to. It maximizes freedom. The individual has the right and the ability to, as long as they're not defrauding anyone, as long as they're not stealing from anyone, they can do whatever they want to with their wealth that they want. Now, another benefit to this particular way of thinking about economics is the idea that, or the emphasis that is also had on maximizing productivity. Maximizing productivity, because you get to keep most of everything that you earn. Then there's that incentive that, hey, if I want to do more, if I want to play more, if I want to have more toys, if I want to eat more, whatever it is that I want, whatever it is that I do, there is that incentive for you to go and work. So you can work to produce more, so that you can earn more, so that you can go and spend more. So there's always the incentive to produce more. And not only that, but there's also the incentive for those people who otherwise might just be lazy and lay around. I mean, their hunger is going to incentivize them to at least produce enough to provide for their own necessities. So there's that idea as well. So this particular way of thinking emphasizes freedom. It emphasizes maximizing productivity. Now, there are drawbacks, however, to capitalism, at least in its purest forms. One of the criticisms that capitalism is often leveled is the idea that there is no inherent safety net to capitalism. In other words, because the freedom is maximized and people can choose to work or to not work, or to work as much as they want or as little as they want, there will be those who either A, they choose not to work and they get themselves to a point where they're starving, or B, maybe they can't work. Maybe they have a disability of some kind. Maybe they're children whose parents have died, and they're just sort of left onto their own. Well, in capitalism, there is no inherent safety net to the system that would prevent these people from just dying and starving to death. Now, one might say, well, yeah, but there are charitable organizations to take care of that. Okay, well, that's all well and good, but we're not guaranteed that under a capitalist system that there will be any charities. And so the capitalist system doesn't even broach those things. So there's no inherent safety net to capitalism and process distributive justice. So that's one of the major criticisms that it has. So there are benefits and there's a downside as well. Now the next view that we're going to look at is a view that is known as end state distributive justice. End state distributive justice. End state distributive justice says that wealth is distributed fairly when everyone makes at least a livable wage and there is less disparity between those at the top and those at the bottom. Wealth is distributed fairly when everyone makes at least a livable wage and there is less disparity between those at the top and those at the bottom. Now, let me hone in on one of the terms that's used here, and that is the term livable wage. There is a difference between livable wage and what we call minimum wage. You see, minimum wage is a wage that is set by the government that tells businesses that you cannot pay anybody less than this particular wage. And at the time of this recording, I believe the federal minimum wage is set at $7.25 an hour. So businesses are not allowed, no matter where they are, no matter what kind of business it is, they are not allowed to pay their employees less than $7.25 an hour. Now, livable wage actually is going to vary from context to context, because what a livable wage is that a livable wage is an index of the cost of living, what it costs in order to just barely get by based on the cost of living in a particular area. So, for example, I live in Indianapolis, and the cost of living is one metric here. It's one index here. But if I were to move, let's say, to the west side of Chicago, the standard of living there is much different. I remember my sister-in-law lives up there, and we went to visit one time. My wife and I did, and we're driving around, and we saw a house. We thought, this is a pretty nice area, you know. And we saw a house that was for sale, and it was about the same square footage as ours. And so we thought, you know what, let's check it out and see how much this house is going for. Well, we got one of the little pamphlets that was in the for sale sign, and we took it out, and lo and behold, that house that was there cost about 4 times as much as our house, and it's just simply because it wasn't any it wasn't any better of a house or better of a neighborhood per se. The manufacturer of the house looked very similar to ours. The square footage, the yard size, all of this looked very similar to ours. It's just the location that it was at. The cost of living in Chicago is much higher than it is in Indianapolis, and so the houses are quite are a lot more expensive. So it costs more for a person to live, just paying their rent, paying utilities, paying for food in Chicago than it does in Indianapolis. So a livable wage is indexed to the location, and it's different in every location. It's going to be the basic, whatever wage is required to provide the basic necessities in that given context. And in-state distributive justice says that, in every place people need to be able to at least live. So they should at least make a livable wage. And then if there's anything else to go around, then there should be less disparity between those at the top and those at the bottom. Now, the question really gets at, how do you accomplish this, practically speaking? How do you accomplish, because let's face it, some jobs, some professions are inherently more productive than others, or immediately more productive than others. For example, a farmer is going to raise crops, and they're probably going to produce a whole lot more than they themselves and their family would be able to eat. So there's an immediate productivity. Whereas, for example, a firefighter, their job is very important, but it doesn't produce a goods or a service to be consumed, right? So inherently speaking, the farmer is going to be more productive in terms of producing resources necessary to live than a firefighter. Now, that's not to say that the firefighter is not important. My goodness, they are. The service they provide for our society is invaluable. We couldn't do it without them. But in terms of just sheer productivity, they don't produce as much. They don't produce goods. They don't produce goods to be sold. They don't produce crops or anything like that to be sold and that people can live off of. So how then practically do we accomplish the ability of everybody to earn a livable wage and maybe be more equitable in our distribution of wealth so that everybody earns about the same amount? Well, the only way really to do that, given the inherent disparity between the productivity of different professions, the only way to do that is to collect all the product and then redistribute it. So whether that product is wealth, whether it's resources, whatever, whether it's cars or shoes or whatever, it's to pool all of those things together and then redistribute them in a way that people can then utilize them and consume whatever resources they need to survive. So with in-state distributive justice, what we have is a major scheme of redistribution of wealth and of property. So the producers produce, it all goes into a pot, and then it goes out and gets disseminated out to various other places. Now, this particular theory forms the foundation moral assumption of socialism. Socialism is an economic theory that says that the means of production in society should be publicly held. Socialism is when the means of production in society are publicly held or controlled. Now, focus on that last phrase there, or controlled. Here's what it means, basically. If the means of production are publicly held or controlled, what that means is that the government has the authority to either A, run the business, and so the business is in the hands of the government, and the government owns it, and then the government employs people, and then it produces whatever needs to be produced, and then turns it around and distributes it. That is what you have with like communism, where all means of production in society are publicly held. Now, if they're publicly controlled, this is what we have in what might be known as democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is where people who own the means of production can keep those means of production for themselves. However, the government has its hand so far into it that the government controls what they can and can't do. So the government tells them who to hire, how many people to hire, how much to produce, who to buy from, how much to pay those people that they hire, what kind of benefits the people get, and so on and so on, how many hours a week they can work, and this kind of thing. If I'm a business owner and the government has such tight control over my business, is it really the case that I own the business? Because the government is the one who assumes the authority to go ahead and tell me what to do with it. So this is the foundational moral assumption of socialism, whether it's communism or democratic socialism or others as well. You can look at fascism and other forms of socialism as well. But that is in state distributive justice. It emphasizes equity rather than necessarily equality. Equity takes it one step further. Equity is the idea that everybody should have the same. This is an equality of outcomes. That if I work 40 hours a week, then I should be able to survive on that. And so and that is accomplished usually through redistribution of wealth and of property. But the idea here is that everybody has relatively the same amount. Now, historically, the problem with in-state distributive justice is the problem that we've seen with any socialistic economy or communistic economy, is that it incentivizes the creation of need and it de-incentivizes productivity. And so therefore, historically speaking, in-state distributive justice has had a very negative impact on productivity, on resources, on wealth building, and so forth, because it incentivizes the creation of need and de-incentivizes the act of productivity. Now, here's what I mean, for example. Let's imagine that myself, I'm 47 years old. Let's imagine that myself, I'm employed in the capacity of being a ditch digger. And I am digging ditches alongside another young man. Let's say that this young man is 22 years old. Now, I'm 47. I'm getting up there a little bit in age. Working, doing physical labor anymore is really taking a toll on me. So in the process of our profession of digging ditches, this young man is digging circles around me, so to speak. This young man is digging twice as much volume as I am digging. And because of that, this young man, it's because I get tired. Because of that, though, this young man is expecting that at the end of the pay or at the end of the week, he'll probably get paid a significant amount. Well, if we live in a place that emphasizes in-state distributive justice, at the end of the week, if that young man has dug twice as much volume of dirt as I have, who gets paid more? Does he get paid more or do I get paid more? Well, somebody might say, well, if it's in-state distributive justice, you probably get paid about the same amount of money because we're talking about equity, right? We're talking about an equality of outcome. Now, while that would be bad enough, actually the case is, in this particular case, that I would probably get paid more than he does. And why would that be? Well, the reason that I would get paid more than him is because he's a young man. Let's say, for example, he's unmarried. He doesn't have a family. He's just one lone guy who is just responsible for taking care of his own needs. I, on the other hand, have 6 children, and therefore I have more need than he does. And in a society that emphasizes in-state distributive justice, the idea is that everybody produces as much as they can. We pool it all, and then we redistribute according to what people need. Well, I've worked all that I can, which is half as much as he's been able to dig in work. So he's produced twice as much as I have. And yet I get paid more why? Because I have more need. I have mouths to feed at home. And so my paycheck is going to probably be about 4 times as much as his. Now, let's say that at the end of the week, we're hanging out and we're comparing paychecks. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I got a great paycheck. And he's looking at mine, looking at his, looking at mine, looking at his. What's he going to do for the next week? Well, the next week, what's going to happen is he's going to go to work and he's going to remember his paycheck and he's not going to dig nearly as much as he did the week before. In fact, he might just come hang out with me when I'm taking a break and we can get to talking and things like that. We might become better friends now. Who knows? But he's not going to produce nearly as much as he did before before he found out how much I got paid. And why would he? I mean, no matter how much he produces, he's not going to get a raise. He's not going to get paid more because you're not rewarded based on your hard work. You're rewarded based on how much you need. And so on the one hand, his productivity is going to trend downward. And if we take this and this effect, and it happens across the entirety of society, can you imagine what ends up happening? Well, yes, the productivity trends downward, and the productivity, it becomes less and less and less. Not only that, though, that's what he's going to do in the immediate, but what else might he do if he's a smart young man? Well, if he's smart and he sees that my check is higher than his because I have more children, he's going to go find himself a wife, and they're going to go start having children. Why? So they can get paid more. So he's going to create need, and he's going to decrease his productivity. Now think about what happens if you do that society-wide. You increase the mouths to feed, you increase the needs that are there, and you decrease the productivity. That's going to inexorably lead to bankruptcy. And that's exactly what we've seen happen in virtually every socialist society that has followed more closely to socialism than maybe trying to adopt some more capitalistic elements to it. But every single one of them, the Soviet Union was brought down, not because President Ronald Reagan made great speeches. The Soviet Union was brought to its knees because of bankruptcy, because they de-incentivizes the production and they incentivize the creation of need. And these two came together and formed the perfect storm to cripple this once superpower. Now, other nations, such as China, have done much better, even though they are communists, because they have adopted capitalistic principles, particularly as it relates to the world at large, and on this international scene. And they've opened their doors much more to capitalist practices, and to that extent, they've thrived under that. But to the extent that a nation would remain socialistic and reward people for the creation of need, and punish people for their talent and their productivity, then they usually go bankrupt. So that's one of the major drawbacks to in-state distributive justice. So now we have process distributive justice, we have in-state distributive justice, and both of them have their sort of benefits, both of them have their liabilities, both of them try to attain certain things, and both of them have some significant problems. On the hand of process distributive justice, you have the problem of the potential of no inherent safety net. You have the potential of monopolies forming and perpetuating greed and armies of unemployed. On the process distributive justice side, or the in-state distributive justice side, you have the almost mathematically certain bankruptcy ahead with the starvation and the poverty that entails. On the other, and so there has to be a middle point, one would think. Well, a philosopher by the name of John Rawls tried to propose a sort of medium point between the two, a sort of a happy medium, and he tries to take the elements of both of them that help benefit both the benefits of both of them, and then minimize the liabilities of both. And Rawls calls his view the equality of opportunity view. Equality of opportunity view. Now, what he's going to say, what Rawls says, is that both of these views, process distributive justice and in-state distributive justice, err at the same point. They both err in really relegating the question to what happens with money, whether money is distributed this way or whether money is distributed that way. And what Rawls is going to say is he's going to say that justice actually comes in and is better seen if we talk about the equality not of wealth, but equality of opportunity. Wealth is distributed justly then, according to Rawls, when people have equal opportunity to acquire it. When people have equal opportunity to acquire it. So equality, is that going to be distributed justly? Now, he has a rather unique way of bringing this to our attention. In order to do it, he asks us to imagine ourselves in sort of a thought experiment. he talks about this concept of the original position. And the original position is sort of a theoretical place where where a person tries to formulate the most just society that they can imagine. And the way that they do this is that they have no knowledge when the end of that society creation is finished. They have no knowledge of where they're going to be. So if I can somehow get to the point where I don't know where I'm going to end up in society, then out of sheer self-interest, I'm going to try to formulate society in such a perfect way so that no matter where I end up, I can always climb the ladder and I can always better myself. You see, Rawls believes that oftentimes when we are living in the society that we're living in now and we're picturing what would be better about this society, oftentimes we're prejudiced by who and what we are in the place that we hold in this society. We're prejudiced so that against forming the more perfect society, because if we do that, it might compromise where we are right here and right now. For example, years ago, I was talking with my grandmother about who we would vote for in this particular presidential primary. So we were voting for the primary, and I said, I want to vote for candidate A. And my grandmother says, why would you vote for candidate A? I would never vote for them because candidate A wants to privatize Social Security and wants to mess with Social Security some. And most of her retirement income came from Social Security. And if somebody was going to mess with that, she might be in a bad way. So her age prejudiced her to doing something different with Social Security, threatened her position in society. Well, I told her, I said, Grandma, I want to vote for candidate A specifically, and that's one of the reasons why I want to vote for them. Because if we go to the rate that we're going right now, Social Security will be out of money and unable to pay full benefits about 5 years before I'm slated to retire. So if that's the case, then I will have paid into Social Security all of my life, thousands and thousands of dollars, and I won't even see a fraction of that. So why should I be all about paying into Social Security when I can have the money back in my paycheck and invest it how I want to toward retirement? So again, my place in society, my place prejudiced me toward doing anything about it as well. And so we are as a society at a stalemate because everybody's looking out for their own interest. Well, in order to get a better society, the best kind possible, we need to forget about all that stuff about ourselves. We need to blind ourselves to those things. We need to, what Rawls says, is we need to enter the veil of ignorance. And the veil of ignorance is a thought experiment where you try to imagine that you don't know your race, your social status, your economic status, your ethnic status, your gender status, your age, your education level, and you could go on. You could go on and on and on and on, right? All of these things about you that prejudice you against doing something in society for the benefit of all. You need to forget about those. And he calls that the veil of ignorance, forgetting about all of those things so that we can get back to the original position. Now, once we're back to the original position, Rawls says, he believes that we will all reach the same conclusion about what constitutes the most perfect society imaginable. If we were successful at reaching the original position, we would all agree on three things, he says. Three things. The first of those three things is, and the most important by far, according to Rawls, is that we need to have the equality of civil rights and equal protection under the law for everybody. Equality of civil rights and equal protection under the law for everybody. If we don't have that, then we are out of luck. If we don't have that, then there's no hope of establishing equality. But if we have that, then no matter where I end up at the end of the day, wherever I end up in society, if we have equality of civil rights and equal protection under the law for everybody, then I can hope to at least be protected by the law without any sort of liability against me in a legal or societal front. So equality of civil rights and equal protection under the law for everyone. That's first and most important. Now the second one that Rawls emphasizes, and it might seem counterintuitive at first, But the second one that he emphasizes is unequal distribution of wealth. Unequal distribution of wealth. Now, if I didn't know where I was going to end up in society, why would I want unequal distribution of wealth? It would seem almost conventional wisdom would dictate that I would agree with having a equal distribution of wealth. So no matter where else I ended up, at least I would have the same as everybody else. But Rawls sees this as being rather naive, and he would say that the reason that we need to have unequal distribution of wealth is because, yes, we might end up at the end of the day at the bottom of the rung, so to speak. But in a society that is geared toward equality of civil rights and equal protection, then that unequal distribution of wealth, even if I end up at the bottom, is going to incentivize me doing better. It will incentivize me climbing the social and economic ladder. And if I can do that, if I can climb the ladder, if I can reach higher, if I can produce more, then not only am I going to be doing better for myself, but let's face it, if I'm producing more and more and more, that's going to have a ripple effect, and other people are going to be benefited from the overflow of my production. And so as I climb the ladder, I not only produce more for myself, I also produce more for all who are around me. And in a society that has an unequal distribution of wealth, there is incentive to produce more. Whereas if we all already start out with the same, as we've noted before, in a in-state or an equality of outcomes scenario, a socialism scenario, that does not incentivize production. And so basically everybody's going to be starving to death together. So Rawls says an unequal distribution of wealth would be a second part in order to incentivize the building of wealth, in order to incentivize productivity in society. And then a third one, he sort of takes a turn next. And then the third one, the third point that he emphasizes is what is called a redress of nature. A redress of nature. And a redress of nature is the idea that there is a liability for everyone to create opportunity for those who are at the bottom. A liability for everyone to create wealth, to create opportunity for those who are at the bottom. This is called the redress of nature. Now, for this point, Rawls says that we are all assigned by nature. We come into this world at a certain place. And some of us we're born with a silver spoon in our mouth, right? Others of us are born in less than advantageous circumstances. But we're all born into this world, and through no fault of our own, some of us have more privilege, more network, more abilities than others. Maybe we're smarter, maybe we have more money, our families have more money, we have more privilege and more advantage. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's not morally wrong to be born in a position of that, but what we do have is a moral obligation to help those who are born in a disadvantaged scenario. They're just children who are conceived by parents who are in poverty. And so they go hungry sometimes, and they don't have the best schools and this kind of thing. What Rawls believes we need to do is we need to, and this sort of progresses gradually as we get higher up on the economic scale. What we need to do is tax people at a progressively higher rate in order to take that money and not redistribute it in the form of cash handouts to people, but redistribute it in a way that provides opportunity for those at the bottom. So it may be things like job training, or it may be things like public libraries. It could be things like tuition payments for college and career training. It could be things as simple as childcare for a mom who has to go to work, and in order for her to go to work, she can get childcare so she can produce more. And on and on and on. There can be many different programs, many different things, healthcare, things like that for those who are underprivileged. Basically providing them the same kind of opportunities or similar opportunities as those who are born in a more advantaged position. And Rawls believes that if we don't know where we'll end up at the end of the day in society, then we would all favor this. We would all be in favor of it. Yes, it's going to cost money, and that money is going to be taken from those who have lots of money, and yes, they have property rights to keep their own stuff. But come on, there's more at stake here than just that. There are literally people that if we pour into them just a little bit, they're going to be able to explode and produce more, even more, and that's going to generate more for society, more benefits, more opportunities for everybody. This is what Rawls. These are his three planks of a perfectly just society: the equal civil rights, equality of civil rights, and equal protection under the law, an unequal distribution of wealth, and then the redress of nature. Those are the three planks of John Rawls and his philosophy. And he believes that if we do those things, it will be a perfectly just society. Yes, people will have to work for what they earn, but they will have a hand up in order to help them up. So that's Rawls. Well, I do want to talk about a couple of theories, political and economic theories that are related to economic justice and things that, the vocabulary that you might want to know in order to just even engage the issue. And so let's talk about a couple of those. The first one that I want to bring up is what is known as libertarianism. Libertarianism. Now, libertarianism is the idea that the government should play a minimal role in economics. In other words, it should protect private property. That's what the government is there for. It's there to protect private property by enforcing contracts that are made in between individuals. It's there to protect private property, maybe in the form of things like insurance of some kind. Some would say, others would say, no, that's not even their role or anything like that. But the idea here is that the government is a very minimal player when it comes to the economy. They're not there to stimulate it. They're not there to sanction it. They're not there to control it or regulate it. They are just there to simply make sure that individuals who have contracts with one another that they pull through on their agreements. They're there to make sure that people don't try to damage or steal property or transfer it in an illegitimate manner. So that's libertarianism. Libertarianism is based on the non-aggression principle, what's known as the non-aggression principle. Basically, it says you're free to do whatever you want so long as you're not harming another person. And harming another person, what would fall under that category is if you were to bring economic harm on someone, or whether through stealing or defrauding them or something like that. So that's libertarianism, sort of an overview of it. Now, libertarianism is the political theory. Capitalism would be the economic theory associated with libertarianism. And as we've already noted, capitalism is where the means of production are privately held. They're privately held in a society. They're held by either corporations or individuals, stockholders, things like this, but they're privately held. The government does not have direct control over how the company operates. Obviously, the exception to that would be if the company were to do anything that would be fraudulent, if they were to be predatorial in nature in this kind of thing, then the government may have a role to intervene at that point. The next one that we'll look at is another political theory, and we've already seen this really, and that is socialism. Socialism is where the means of production in society are either publicly held or publicly controlled. This is where either the government owns all the means of production, all the farms, all the manufacturing plants, and this kind of thing, or individuals own them, and the government tells the individuals what they can and can't do with them. So it's regulated, highly regulated, or controlled by others, by the government. The next one is a political theory known as modern liberalism. Modern liberalism. Now this one's kind of an interesting one, but it starts out with the assumption that the state is the guard of businesses. The state is sort of the guard of businesses, and business. There are no property rights. There are no businesses don't do business by the fact that they have a right to do business with one another. Rather, businesses exist by the grace of the state. The state is the one that gives the business its blessing. And so the business has to go, and they want to grow and make money. They do so at the allowance of the state. So that is that's what the underlying theory is to modern liberalism. The state has the right then to levy taxes, to impose regulations and so forth, and it does that presumably for the benefit of all. So that would be modern liberalism. And then the last one, really, in your book talks about this a little bit more in depth, but the last one is communitarianism. And communitarianism really looks at the whole scenario of economics and really is dissatisfied with the notion that economics is just a money problem. It's a problem of decimal points and resources and earned and material things. Communitarianism wants to try to bring an emphasis of community into the economic question, and it believes that that we need to recognize the social nature of people when we're considering economic justice. That people are grouped together, for example, in family units. We talk about the economy of the family. What is the impact that certain economic scenarios are going to have on that family? So if both mom and dad are working outside of the house and their kids are basically being raised by either public school or caregivers, then what kind of impact is that going to have on the community? Versus if one of the other stays home with their child and they can raise and inculcate the child with their own values and this sort of thing. So communitarianism just emphasizes the need to consider the needs of a community or people as social animals when it comes to issues of economic justice. Well, that's about all we have for this topic right now. Make sure that you check the syllabus, make sure you do the reading, and do all the work that is included in the syllabus there. And we will see you in the next video. Have a great one.